the UK sector deal set a new level of ambition and intent, and you were heavily involved in bringing that about. Can you tell me a bit about the various stakeholder organisations that were involved in that?
So it's first of all, it was a fantastic experience. Can you imagine negotiating something for your industry with the government to change policy in the country? So that was fantastic. But what we had to do was we had to be an industry. So instead of being individual players within an industry, you had to get together. So whether you were a developer, an OEM, a trade body, Catapult, and the government, you had to actually figure out how this industry is going to work better, what your honest challenges are, and put all the elephants in the room so that you can address them. And so when we first turned up, it was, are we really an industry? Are we joined up? Can we make promises? Do we actually all have the same beliefs and path? And so we took 26 months to develop the sector deal, and I think it's a really good quality document because it had so many inputs to it, and it took a long time to debate. And now I think we grow up. Suddenly we become mainstream with the sector deal and all the elements of it. We address everything that's required within the industry to go forward. So pleased to have my name associated with it.
Absolutely. And at the outset, what did you consider to be the most critical challenges that needed to be addressed?
Well, the first challenge you have is to address the concerns that people have. Because when we started doing this as a sector deal, people not only had the cost, they also had, will it work with grid? Is there enough seabed going to be developed? How are you going to develop the skills? Are you a diverse enough industry? Are you reaching out to the right people in order to grow? So we had to tackle all of those head on. And, you know, I think we came up with answers to them all. The biggest one, of course, was the pipeline. The pipeline with the auctions and before wasn't sufficient for people to be able to see and to invest and to get their company in a shape where they had confidence there was a market. So I think what the sector deal does is it's confirmed the market, and with the offshore wind growth partnership and the clusters and the skills agendas, we can have mechanisms now to bring people into the industry and help them thrive. That was something we never had before.
From what you're saying, it sounds as though collaboration was a key learning from this process. Would you agree with that? And what were some of the other learnings?
So we recognised early on that if we didn't speak with a single voice and we didn't address this as a team, then we weren't going to be able to help the industry grow. So the government would look at us and say, I really only want one offshore wind organisation that's going to tackle the challenge of growing offshore wind safely, at a good cost, with a benefit to the UK. And so therefore, collaborating as a team, answering the questions as a team, getting us all to sign up to the answers, which, by the way, wasn't an easy thing to do, but I think as a result, we've got a stronger offshore wind industry.
It certainly seems that way. And do you feel that there are learnings from the UK sector deal that could help drive growth in other global markets?
I do, because in the other global markets, the governments have got an idea. First of all, I think we've made offshore wind popular, and it's got a great brand, which it didn't have before. But then I would say to other regions of the world, do this as a team. If you're going to grow an industry, then get people together who are going to make the industry happen, rather than having them work as individuals or individual developers or only competing. And a great example of that was safety. You know, when we first started off as an industry, our safety wasn't a benchmark safety. And the first thing we did was say, safety is an industry issue. It's not to be used as a competitive advantage. We need to learn from each other. So as we go to new places and we take on new people and we take on new suppliers, there's a great example of how we've already used working as a teamwork to keep everybody safe in our industry. Let's do more of that.
Absolutely. And so finally, do you think the UK sector deal went far enough?
No. More. I think the Committee for Climate Change realised we could do more, but it's a journey. You know, we're at 8 gigawatts of offshore. We've got pipeline to 10. Suddenly we've doubled that. It's taken us more than 10 years to get the first 10 gigawatts, nearly 20. In the next 10 years we're going to double that. So what I say is, let's set the stepping stones. And And if you make the stepping stones too far apart, you fall in the water.
We've played a varied role in the wind sector. Of course, the Department for International Trade, we're all about getting the UK exporting, but also attracting foreign direct investment, particularly into the offshore sector, of course. So in that sense, we've become one of the guardians of UK content. So while, as you'll see in the sector deal, we're pushing for greater UK content, at the same time, we need companies who can deliver that. So whether that's growing homegrown talent or attracting foreign companies to set up in the UK, DIT, along with our colleagues in BAYS, are very keen to see that we have effectively a very good shop front for offshore wind in the UK. So that's, if you like, our key role in the renewable space.
And you just mentioned the UK sector deal, which has obviously brought a great amount of certainty and a roadmap for progress. How do you see that driving growth in the UK and beyond?
First of all, we are absolutely incredibly excited about the sector deal. We were instrumental along with our leading colleagues in BAYS, working with the industry to get this over the line. It took a long time, but I think the result is very worthwhile. It's exciting. The sector has the insurance it needs. It has £557 million. It has the aspiration of 30 gigawatts, and also the agreed aspirations, sort of, if you like, in the reverse, where we're going to increase UK content to 60% by 2030. We're going to increase employment to 27,000, hopefully, and also important ones like equality. But I suppose the most important one for our department is, of course, sort of the fivefold increase in exports. We're currently exporting around about £500 million worth of goods in the offshore sector. The sector deal has a target of 2.6 billion. How do we achieve that? From a DIT perspective, I think the really interesting point is that this is not just DIT delivering it for once. This is DIT with the industry delivering it. So this is working with developers, taking UK content overseas. It's also working with developers to grow the homegrown talent in the UK, where we have it, attract new talent where we don't have it, to ultimately, at the end of it, get into a very stable domestic market, but also a very, very good market for export.
Fantastic, thank you. We're starting to see subsidy-free projects in Germany and elsewhere in the Netherlands. Is that on the short-term horizon for the UK?
Good question, very good question, and you can get into an awful lot of technical detail. What does subsidy-free really mean? Is it that are you playing on the wholesale market, etc.? Also, where does the grid connection come from? Because in Germany you get given a grid connection. In UK you have to fund a grid connection. So I think Ørsted did some very interesting analysis showing that the UK is almost subsidy-free in a German context where we are currently today. I think this next CFD round, of course, the next allocation round, which is live and running, and we have a number of projects vying for money. It's going to be very interesting to see where the prices come out. The UK government has been very, very clear in the sector deal. We have this £557 million annual fee to subsidise offshore wind. So there is finance there. I think there is a big debate: is subsidy free, or is it a zero subsidy, which effectively shields investors from fluctuations in the wholesale market price? But ultimately, yes, we see very much the technology in offshore wind getting to that point where it's no longer going to be subsidised. It really is moving into a mainstream power generation technology, and as you already know from the sector deal, 2030, 30 gigawatts. But more interestingly, 2050, net zero carbon. Offshore wind is going to play a very big role in this, because we will need to electrify transport, heating systems. Whether it's via hydrogen is still to be seen, but there is a very bright future for offshore wind as a major power generator, and yes, it will have to eventually fight on a subsidy-free basis.
You're a leading architect of the sector deal, which has energised the sector and beyond. What would you say are the key learnings from that experience?
For me, the key learning has been about having to work together as an industry and having to speak and represent ourselves as an industry. I mean, I've been working in policy and trying to shape the regulatory framework for way too many years. And the bit that really surprised me was when we were forced to actually articulate who we are as an industry and speak as one, how powerful that voice was. As part of my role, I attend party conferences. And so at a time when there's so much infrastructure investment going on in the UK, HS2, Hinkley, Crossrail and so on, to be able to be at those conferences and actually describe what we're doing in offshore wind, to talk about the fact that we're the fourth biggest infrastructure project. Of every £5 being spent in offshore wind, in infrastructure in the UK at the minute, £1 of that is spent in offshore wind. And we are huge. And guess what? We deliver on time, not just to budget, we deliver cost reduction. And beyond that, we're delivering decarbonised energy. So we're so much part of the solution. And so I think the real learning for me has been really how to articulate who we are as an industry and speaking as one as an industry and the power that's given us and the doors that's opened. From my perspective, on a policy basis, some of the things that I've been working on for years on aviation radar mitigation, things like that, I'm now having conversations with the right people from all departments because the sector deals about a cross-government collaboration. Bringing together all the different government departments for this, which is now government's policy. Government's policy is the 30 gigawatts by 2030, and so all departments are now working together to deliver that and working together with an industry that is really valued in the UK.
I think it's fair to say that as of June 2019, there's still a degree of uncertainty around the timings and process and impacts of the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. With that caveat, what would you say are likely to be the main changes for the offshore wind sector, both for the UK and for the remaining EU member states?
Yeah, so like all businesses in all sectors, we're finding it very difficult to plan for a very uncertain outcome. That said, we've had 3 years now to kind of plan, and of course, like all sensible businesses, we've been doing a lot of work around that. And the good news is we fundamentally don't see any changes. The UK has kind of led the way on climate change agenda. We have the Climate Change Act enshrined in law and now commitment to a net zero target. So we don't think anything fundamentally will change in the drive and the reasons behind offshore wind. There may be some short-term changes to kind of operating practices around that kind of exit. But again, we don't see anything that's too major. We don't see anything that will change the government's course from a focus on offshore wind or from the industry's ability to deliver in the UK.
Well, that's a very positive message. In terms of the regulatory framework, do you think enough has been done to mitigate the potential impact?
Well, like all businesses, I guess we would say we would love to have seen more clarity on this. It does seem crazy that we're 3 years down the line and really nobody is really any clearer what that outcome is. There has been some help there. We have been working with government and talking about those issues, particularly the wind sector and others are of course affected, not so much by some of the kind of EU rules, most of which will say the same, but things like how the application of customs rules and import taxes apply. So we've had some good dialogue with government and some good support around that. And we're quite confident that the things that need to be in place are there, so we'll continue our operations and carry on in a positive mode in the UK.
That's great. And so thinking about organisations working within the offshore wind sector, what specific actions do you think they should be taking right now to insulate the business and thrive in the post-Brexit UK market?
Yeah, so from the outset we kind of identified 3 main risks that we needed to consider. So the first was the application of tariffs on goods we move in and out of the country, which affect both components coming in and of course any components we export. Second was about the other kind of non-tariff barriers, so total disruption at ports and logistics routes. And the third was about movement of people. So we've been working really across those 3 areas, trying to make sure that wherever we can, we take some sensible mitigations to avoid any issues, borders, those kind of things. So we've looked at our logistics route. In some cases, we've increased slightly some of the stock holding of components we have in the UK. So it's really about not kind of stockpiling or panicking, but just taking those kind of sensible decisions to make sure for all the eventualities that you can see, that your kind of business is covered. So it's a lot like business continuity planning. You're just trying to cover all of the risks and cover it off. But again, there's nothing we see that will be a major disruptor to us. Clearly, if there's a kind of sudden Brexit exit on 31st of October or any other time, then there is potential for some disruption. But we think we've got that covered, and we've got a lot of kind of backstop plans in place to really consider what we would do if that was the situation.